Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Malone. I'm with the Douglas Community Land Trust. Thank you to the folks that are here. Sorry, I will make sure I'm in camera too. Thank you to everybody who come out and for people joining virtually. We are going to have a great presentation from Christine Kulamani from the DC Bar. It is going to cover the Corporate Transparency Act. So I want to thank our partners. First, the folks at LEDC who are letting us use their lovely space. Second, NLSP who provides great legal access for co-ops. And of course, Christine and the DC Bar. So we are from Douglas Community Land Trust, and we hold space both virtual, digitally and literally by holding affordability for properties in perpetuity. That doesn't end after you buy your building. So we want to make sure that you are given the tools to run a multi-million-dollar business in your spare time and keep up with all the emerging regulations. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Christine.
Thanks, Adam, and thank you everybody for joining or watching this recording. I am Christine, and I am a managing attorney at the DC Bar Pro Bono Center. I am not a housing attorney. I do business law, so I work with small businesses and nonprofits, and it just so happens that housing condos and housing co-ops are organizations that are business law-y, and I have developed some expertise on a new area of law that you all need to know about, unfortunately. So, the Corporate Transparency Act. What is this thing that we're hearing about, or we didn't know about and realize maybe we should? The Corporate Transparency Act is a federal law that came into effect in 2020 that requires certain types of business entities to report information on their beneficial owners, which we will get into, through what's called a Beneficial Ownership Information Report. The law was not designed to have anything to do with what any of us are here to learn about. It's targeting financial crimes. So people who are doing tax fraud, drug trafficking, money laundering, financing terrorism, and illegal money things through using corporate business entities. Everybody else gets to play along so that they can try to catch them. This law is being enforced by part of the US Treasury, so people working mostly here in DC, and it is called the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. Most of us don't have to worry about them outside of this, thankfully. So I mentioned that this law requires a report, but how do you know if you need to file the report? All entities created by filing paperwork with the Secretary of State or a similar agency have to file a report unless they are exempt. Here in the District of Columbia, we don't have a Secretary of State, but the entity that you would file paperwork with to create, formerly the DC Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs, DCRA, now called the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection. That's where you would go. In some other states, it would be the Secretary of State or the Superintendent of Corporations. Some of the business entities that are examples related to housing organizations that are created by filing a report so that you don't have to try to figure out, this type one of them? Corporation, nonprofit corporation, for-profit corporation, non-stock corporation, stock corporation, general cooperative association, and limited liability company. If your organization is one of those types, you will need to file a beneficial ownership information report. The condo association or the co-op itself is responsible. You don't have to do it, however, if you are exempt. Unfortunately, many of you will not be, and we'll get into those. If you don't know if you have an entity, a business entity, how can you check? Are you a corporation? Are you a cooperative association? The way to look it up is first, if you are on the board, which is probably why you're here, or if you're an owner, look in the bylaws or the rules governing the building. Usually it will say the name, the type of organization, and where it was formed. So for example, I used to live in a co-op, and so it would be the Winchester Underwood Cooperative, I don't know, whatever it was formed at, in the District of Columbia. So that will tell you what type of organization it is. Also, you can look up online, if you have a business entity, what type it is. In DC, you will look on Corp Online. And the link is right here. Delaware, which some organizations were formed in, here's their website, or the Secretary of State. So you will go on their website and type in the name and see if it pops up and what it says. There's a picture right here of what DC's search system looks like. And that will show everybody with cooperative in the name. If you don't know which state it was formed in, going to those documents. Again, it's going to be your best first step. And then if that doesn't help, and you've looked at DC, you've looked at Delaware, some Googling. Lots of business filings are public. And so it all ends up on the web, for better or worse. I mentioned that there are some exemptions. There are actually 23 of them. The biggest one that might apply to some large buildings here in DC is that the entity, the organization, so the cooperative or the condo association, has more than 20 employees, has more than $5 million in gross receipts, and has a physical US office. So really big. And it's all three of those. It's not just one. More than 20 employees, more than 5 million in gross receipts last year, and a physical US office. And everywhere here, your building is the physical US office. So, we check that one off, but you need the other two. Organizations that are federally tax exempt under Section 501(c) are likely exempt from filing under the Corporate Transparency Act. 501(c)(3) is what typically we think of as a nonprofit, a charitable organization. They are the type that your donations to are tax deductible. None of us will be one of those. There might be some very limited organizations that have some type of tax exempt status under 501(c)(6), but you will know if you have one. In this world, if you have it, it's a big advantage. You will have a lot of paperwork, and you will file special returns with the IRS.
We have a question from the chat. Just clarifying. What if it's seasonal employees? Is it 20 full-time employees?
So, yeah, that's a good question. So first, it's employees, not independent contractors. So we want to make sure that they are on the payroll, getting all of the rights of DC employees, including the leave that they're entitled to, minimum wage, overtime. And then we're going to look at, okay, if we're taking a total of 20 different workers, or is it 20 FTEs, full-time equivalents, which is typically how we measure employees, including this law. So if there's a point in the year where there are 20 workers at once, you can make an argument that you are exempt. The other big exemption, and probably won't apply here, are really regulated types of businesses that are giving their information about who owns them, who runs them, to the federal or state government. Banks, FinCEN also regulates banks a lot, and banks have lots of reporting requirements at states. Insurance producers, those are the two big ones. Unfortunately, a residential housing building does not also sell insurance policies. So most likely, you're not going to be exempt. And if you are, it will be this large operating company with more than 20 employees, FTEs, more than $5 million in gross receipts or sales, and that physical US office. So we've determined you have to file a report. You are a corporation or a cooperative association formed by filing paperwork with the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, and you aren't exempt. When do you have to take these steps and do this paperwork? File the beneficial ownership information report. If the business entity, the underlying corporation, existed before January 1st, 2024, you have until January 1st of 2025 to file the first report. You have until then, but you can file now. So if the organization, the paperwork was filed to create it before January 1st of 2024, you have until January 1st, 2025. And this is going to be most. This is almost everybody is in this situation. If the organization was created between January 1st, 2024 through now, or ultimately, if you're not yet created and it's through the end of 2024, you must file the first report within 90 days of forming. So you have 90 days. If the organization was created earlier in 2024, in January or February, and you did not file yet, it's okay. The 90 days are past, but you can still do it, and you should still do it. And for those who are watching in the future, who are planning, if the entity, the organization is created after January 1st of 2025, so anytime after 2025, until we hear otherwise, you have 30 days to file. So the trend is the newer you are, the less time you have to catch up. Older, the more time. Those are for initial reports I mentioned, the first report. There have to be updated reports filed also if information changes. So anytime information in the report changes, there are 30 days from when that changes to file. And we'll get into some of these details, but if board members change or there are new other beneficial owners, you have 30 days to file an updated report from then. And again, if something happens and it's not filed and it's 31 days, don't let that scare you. Do your best. At least right now, in the current situation, FinCEN, who is enforcing the law, doesn't want to penalize people that are trying. That could change, but for right now, as of September 18th, that is where we are. We know we need to report. We are not exempt. We need to report by January 1st, 2025. How do you actually do it? All reports have to be filed electronically. There is no paper submission. There is no handwriting anything in. All of the information must be typed and electronically submitted. So for those of you here in person, you may have a printed copy of what the report looks like. Or if you download it offline, you can write in it to help you determine and fill it in, but you cannot scan and submit that. The first way you can submit the information electronically is inputting all of it into the beneficial ownership system. And that will be on the website. There will be boxes that you fill in as you go. There also is that PDF that is fillable that you type into it, you save it on your computer, and then upload it back to the website. These are designed to be user-friendly. But again, they have to be filed electronically. And when you go to file it, they will ask you questions. And you think, is this an initial report? Are you correcting? Are you updating? You can see here on the screen, they try to ask you questions to get you to fill out the information they need. So doing this electronically is required. That said, I do not recommend that you do it on a tablet or a cell phone. If at all possible, use a computer. Go to the library, go to a trusted neighbor or friend or person in your building, management, or a community organization to help you. There are a lot of problems trying to make sure that a tablet or a phone has the proper functionality, it looks correct, it uploads attachments. So try to use a computer. Also, I mentioned that convenient fillable PDF. That may not work on all computers. A certain level of Adobe Reader is required for it to work. And so I have sent it out to people so they can get a look and they will let me know, I can't open this on my computer because I have just normal PDF viewer. And that is not great. We do have a sample copy for all of you in a plain readable PDF so that you can get a look, but you cannot use that to submit. And just like the website, that fillable PDF, as you check boxes and give information, will gray out certain sections. So you don't have to complete certain information that they don't need from you based on how you answer questions. Most important, filing is free. If you go onto the internet and search for it, the first result is probably a business trying to get you to pay them to do it for you. Or somebody asking for the information and they will submit it for you. You can do it yourself or with the help of somebody that you know and trust that you do not have to pay, or you can pay in being a good friendship or returning the favor. But it is free to file. Anything that asks you for a fee is a scam. and it is not the federal government filing. Once you have successfully filed, download the report transcript after you submit so that you have a copy of what was ultimately given to the government and a record of the time. You can save it with all of the other records that your organization has. So, with a copy of your bylaws, your business license, your corporate registration, who the current owners and tenants are. Keep this with that because it will be important. If you don't have it, that will be a problem. We don't know how, but that's usually how it happens, is the one piece of paperwork you don't have is the one you need. So we need to file a report. We know that we need to file it by January 1st, 2025. We know that you have to file it online and that it is free. But what are the contents of this report? What goes into it? And what attachments do we have to have? First is entity information. So the legal name of the entity. X, Y, and Z Cooperative Incorporated. Or whatever the legal name on file with the government when you created the entity is. Also, if there are trade names, which are sometimes known as DBA, doing business as, or fictitious names. And these are other names that are not the legal name that the co-op or condo association uses. Sometimes they're shortened or they're an acronym. Not everybody will have one of these, but some might. You also will need a tax ID. You'll tell them the type and the number. The options are going to be Social Security number, which is usually not the identifier for one of these organizations, an ITIN, which is a Social Security number equivalent, individual taxpayer identification number, which again is for a natural person. Usually that will not be used here. And then an EIN, a federal employer identification number. The EIN is usually what was used to establish the bank account. It is what's used for any federal tax returns. If you have employees, it is what is used to tie them and the tax payments you make for them to the federal government back to your organization. So employer identification number is generally going to be what you use. But know that that's what tax ID type is. And the number, the format will be 2 numbers and then a hyphen and then 7 numbers. So it is 9, just like a Social Security number, but it's broken up differently. Instead of 3, 2, 4 for a Social Security number, it's 2 and then 7. So keep an eye out if you're thinking, is this our EIN or FEIN? Also, you will need to tell them what's called the domestic jurisdiction where the entity was formed. And that means the state or DC where the entity was originally created. Some of you may have a corporation that was originally formed in the state of Delaware. But you also register as what's called a foreign entity with DC every 2 years. They want that domestic jurisdiction, Delaware, the place where you originally formed. They want your home, domestic, think of that as home for the corporation or the cooperative association. So they need to know what that state is. If you're looking at the PDF, there's also a lot of other boxes, but they will be grayed out once you say it's a US state. So don't worry about foreign country or tribal jurisdiction. Finally, for the entity itself, they ask for the address. That is the location for the building. If you have multiple mailing addresses for the building, there are a couple of buildings or multiple entrances, use whichever one is the official address and where there is the office or mail will be delivered to most easily that the board will get. So we have for the entity itself, the corporation, the cooperative association, the name, the legal name, if there are trade names, those, the tax ID, type and number, so the employer identification number, and then the 9 numbers, where the entity was formed, and then the address. And then this is where things get a little tricky. You also have to provide information for each beneficial owner. In a minute, we will get down into what is that. So for each of these beneficial owners, their full legal name, whatever is on record with the government, their residential address, their date of birth, including year, and valid current photo IDs information, so everything on it, and a picture of that ID. What is considered valid ID? Most preferred is a US issued ID from the state or a federal government. So a driver's license, a state identification card, a military ID, a US passport are the most common, as long as they have a photo on them. It is not clear, because this law is so new and nobody had to do anything until about 9 months ago. We don't know if non-real IDs are valid. So for many years now, states have been required to move identification cards to real ID, where they verify the person. They get some information. It's being pushed back repeatedly. If you have a DC driver's license, you likely have a real ID. If you do not have a real ID, and I believe they have stars on them to indicate, use what you have and submit that. I'm not aware of any filings being invalid for having a non-real ID, but technically we don't know if they're willing to accept them. If you do not, or a beneficial owner does not have US issued current valid ID, they are willing to take a foreign issued passport that is valid, current. So if you don't have US issued, or somebody does not, they will take a foreign one, but that is a last resort for them. So legal name, residential address, date of birth, information from a photo ID, and a picture of it. Don't worry about the picture being great or perfect. I'm on a nonprofit and we had to submit one, and I took it on my cell phone with horrible lighting, and it's been months and everything's fine as far as I know. So just showing that you are trying to comply. Don't worry about it being perfect. So we mentioned that you need that for all the beneficial owners. But what is a beneficial owner? It is not an owner in the traditional sense of a business necessarily. There are a few different thresholds. So anybody that has 25 or more % ownership interest in the business. If you are in a building and there is one owner of multiple units, or you only have 4 units and they each have equal voting power at 25%, anybody with more than 25% is a beneficial owner by definition. Typically, when you look at the documents for your building, next to each unit number, it will list a percentage. And that's part of how monthly fees are assessed and property taxes. And so looking, is there any one that is 25% or more? And if there is one person that owns multiple, add them all together. If one person has a bunch of units that are owned, then they have, let's say, 6%, but they have 5 of them, so they have 30. I'm a lawyer, not a math person, thank you. Then those 6 units, that 30% would make them a beneficial owner by the numbers. To establish that, it's looking at records. It's looking at records, doing math. There isn't really a legal analysis needed there. The other type of beneficial owner are individuals that have substantial control or decision-making authority over the organization. Technically, to determine who this is, it is an analysis that is different for every organization. You look at all of the facts, the structure, who makes decisions, what power do they have to make decisions, are they controlling day to day? You should not need to do that. The simple answer for most housing groups is going to be that all members of the board of directors, or whatever you call the elected board that makes decisions, are beneficial owners. They have control together to do what needs to be done for the building. Yep.
Have an officer like a trade who's not actually a member of the board, but does make decisions in terms of transferring money from the bank account or getting things. Was that then counted?
Yep. So if you have an officer that is not a member of the board, would they be considered a beneficial owner? It depends. Are they voting on things?
Oh, I see.
Are they making decisions? Or is it just sort of a clerical job, similar to a corporate secretary that just takes the minutes, but has no authority of what to do with them?
It's the next step. Have authority over the money that's stolen. I don't think we're going to go on the board. So it's still have a lot of reports.
Yeah.
Don't think decision making best.
Yeah, I would err on. Repeat the question again? Okay.
So that's substantial.
Yeah, so
Within that.
so if they control or are able to access money, but they can't do that because they don't have a vote without the board telling them they can, would they be a beneficial owner? I would say yes.
Is it best to file and then even if they, if you think
It is better to file and include people that you believe are probably a beneficial owner, but not 100%. than to not. And part of why is because it's based on these little facts. And sometimes doing the analysis for every single little thing is going to take so much time and resources that if they're willing to, just include them. You're not funding terrorists or laundering money, so it won't matter in the end, hopefully. If there are employees, they also might be beneficial owners under this substantial control or decision-making. Typically, this will apply to larger organizations that have a CEO that maybe isn't a member of the board, but can make really big decisions about buying or selling land, changing the direction of the organization. Most of you will not need to worry about that. And you're thinking, well, what about our manager or our management company, if you have one? They should not have substantial control or decision-making authority. In a proper management agreement, they are following the board's instructions and directions. It is not always the case, but that is how it should be. And so typically they are not a beneficial owner.
A couple questions on this. Is okay by Masha? Okay. So clarification was that yes, it is all board members, not just officers. Is that
Yep. So it is not all, in terms of beneficial owners, it's going to be all members of the board, not just the officers of the board. So everybody.
But it is not all shareholders in the co-op.
Correct. That it is not all shareholders in the cooperative, though it would be shareholders if they have 25% or more ownership. And I know DC, we do have many small, like 3 and 4 unit buildings. So in that case, it could be all shareholders. Any more on this? Okay.
Thank you.
So under these rules, you may not have a beneficial owner with 25% or more ownership interest, but you must have at least one with substantial control or decision-making authority. Right? There has to be somebody that can do that. Whether they actually do it or it's on paper, there will be at least one. And if you have a board of more than one, which is required, it will be all of those board members at least. Okay, so we need the information I talked about for all of the beneficial owners. There could be 3 of them, there might be 10 of them. What happens if a beneficial owner doesn't provide the information you need or a copy of their ID? First, they should be reminded that it is a federal requirement to provide it and that there are penalties and consequences. Also, if needed, just file the report without them. Try to talk to them, have conversations, engage with them. And then when you get the updated information, you can file an updated report. It's free. It's not like when you file things with the DC government, every time you file paperwork, you have to pay money. This is free. So update. There are individual beneficial owners that are hesitant to provide their information to whoever is filing on behalf of the housing organization, but they're fine giving the information to the government. They're like, I just don't want to give some person a copy of my ID and my birthday. Just reasonable. They can go to the FinCEN website, create a FinCEN ID, upload their information and documents, and then provide the condo association or co-op with their FinCEN ID, and it will link them together. So there is an option there, right? Keeping your information or another board member's information close to them. Also, it's worth updating any board documents, bylaws, procedures to require board members to provide the information to the best of their ability and any other information required by the government. Having any other information required will hopefully prevent you from having to change this section again in the future. That doesn't solve everything, but that is trying our best. Thinking about, access to the information. This is a lot of personal information about people, their legal name, a picture of their ID, their birthday, their home. Who can get this information that you submit on who the beneficial owners are? Right now, FinCEN, the part of the Treasury where you submit it, are the ones that have access. As this continues to carry on, financial institutions, banks, and lenders will be able to access the information with consent. So if you try and get a loan or a new mortgage from a bank, they may ask, can we access your beneficial ownership information report? And you will sign a consent saying yes. The bank may also ask similar information. Other government agencies also can request the beneficial ownership information. Banks, FinCEN, and other government agencies under the law have really strict confidentiality requirements and procedures for accessing the information. That said, just because they have to be on a computer in one room and only look at it for a certain amount of time doesn't get into why they can access it. Yes.
Question. If another government entity wants the information, do they have to ask for your consent like banks do?
So if a government agency that is not FinCEN would like to access the beneficial ownership information, do they need consent? The answer is no. They do not need the organization or the beneficial owner's consent. What they do and how they will access it, or try to, is they will submit a request to FinCEN, and this is federal, state, local, or tribal, and some foreign officials, unclear who the foreign officials are, but it's very limited, will submit a request, and they need to say, one second, to say that it is 1 minute. No problem. So the purposes that they can give in their request are that it's for authorized activities related to national security, intelligence, or law enforcement activities. That is quite broad. So they need to establish in the request that the information that they're requesting, the specific beneficial ownership information, they say we want, they can't say we want every entity in the District of Columbia. They need to be specific. It is for use in a national security, intelligence, or law enforcement activity, and why they believe the beneficial ownership information is relevant to that national security, intelligence, or law enforcement activity. But they need to have some tie or information making them believe this will help them. That said, again, these are people making their requests, people approving them, people interpreting the law and the meaning of it. Law enforcement activities and national security activities and intelligence activities could all be defined very broadly by the government. So just know there's not much you can do about it, unfortunately, but agencies may have information on who these beneficial owners are. Yes.
Would either the organization or the individual receive notice that there's been a request made?
No. So the individual beneficial owners or the entity that files will not receive notification that their information has been accessed. They will not receive a warrant or any type of other procedure. And I do not deal in the area of criminal law much, but there are some times where the government gets your information, especially from third parties, and you don't know. And there are some times where they come knocking on your door with a search warrant and say, give us your phone, and hold it up to your face to scan and unlock it. And you know they're getting it. And this is a situation where you will not know just that they've accessed it.
What happens when the board changes and people go on? Do they keep that information or does that get replaced by new entities?
So when the board or other beneficial owners change, you will file an updated report. And that updated report you file will take the place in the system of the old report.
So the updated report has to have all the information that people are saying on the board, the same thing.
It's the current board.
And then we just add the new people?
Correct.
We have to keep the old, we don't have to input it each year, do we?
And I would say you do not need to input new information and redo, everything for every person each time, but your condo association or co-op should keep a copy that you've submitted old ones for your records.
Right, and then you check updating.
Yes, update.
And you just put the new names in?
Yes. And it will ask who has left also.
It will ask.
So it tries to direct you based on information you give. Okay, what is being updated? So if the name has changed, or is it a new individual?
Okay. It
So
will be an adventure. That's what you're saying.
but we will see. Updated reports, might be an adventure. They might be interesting. They are not common yet because so many entities have not filed yet. In theory, it should be easier than filing the initial report.
I'll find out in November, because we're gonna file, I hope in the next, couple of weeks, we'll be changing in November. So I'll let you know.
What everybody wants to know, well, what happens if we don't do this? What are the penalties? If information is willfully not filed or updated timely, there is a $500 per day penalty. Yeah, that's a lot. And then if there are violations for criminal purposes, so the people that they're actually trying to target for money laundering and bad money things, up to a $10,000 fine and 2 years in prison for not providing the information. And that's on top of any other crimes. Right now, FinCEN is openly stating that they will not punish people that are trying to comply and doing their best to follow the law. That's part of where this willful comes in. Are you doing it intentionally? Or are you trying to comply, but there was a technical error, or you didn't know about the law, or, information changed and you were waiting on somebody to get you a copy of their ID, or they were trying to set up their FinCEN identifier. Right now, they are saying, we are not punishing those. You do not need to be concerned about a penalty. That could change in the future, but right now, as of this date, that is where we are. So do your best, try and get other people on board. Really, it's trying to comply at this point. They know that people are not going to follow this at first. The fact that you are listening, watching, you are a step ahead of people in knowing that this exists. And so it's going to take a while for things to catch on. Just try. Okay. Do we have any questions before I share some more resources that might be helpful if you need that one-on-one analysis?
If a natural person doesn't have an ID, either US, and maybe they don't have any other ID, is there anything that they can submit that would be good to submit to the government? Or should they consider being on the board or not?
Yes. So, great question about if somebody does not have any government ID and is unable to get it, whether it's a US ID or a foreign ID. What do? Can they submit alternative paperwork? Can they be a board member? There is no good solution for this yet. There's no alternative paperwork that they can provide, no birth certificate and something else with a photo. It needs to be a US issued current ID or a current foreign passport. Organizations that have board members or wish to have board members that do not have these documents, for the time being, might want to consider, are there other ways to allow this individual's input to the board, on the board, to have their voice heard without making them a beneficial owner? I cannot tell you, file the report without them and violate the law. I can't tell you that, I can't know that, but that may also happen, honestly. That's just the truth of the matter. It is hopeful that at some point there will be some type of solution. Particularly, it's a bit less related to housing, but all of the small businesses that will need to submit this, there are massive numbers of entrepreneurs in the US that do not have any form of ID. They may not have legal status in the country and ability to get an ID, but they are entrepreneurs and they have a business. They pay taxes, they contribute to our economy, they create jobs, but they don't have this documentation. So hopefully we get something soon giving a path forward, but right now we do not. And it is unlikely that that will change soon. First, because this is a law passed by Congress, and Congress right now is focused on upcoming elections. And legislation takes a really long time. If anything changes, the Pro Bono Center hopes to have an update for you and work with our community partners to get that information. But right now, there is no alternative.
Copy of your slides. It gives me, it was very helpful to pass that around the board.
Yep.
you know, that would be very helpful.
And this is also being recorded. And so you both can get a copy of the slides by email, as well as a copy of that beneficial ownership report that should be almost universally openable.
And there will be Spanish recording as well.
Oh, great. So yes, both Spanish and English recording. The slides are both in Spanish and English. Unfortunately, the beneficial ownership information report is only in English. They have some guidance materials in Spanish and other languages on FinCEN's website. Other than English, Spanish is the most up-to-date. But for any language other than English, many of the documents and supporting things are not the most up-to-date because they haven't got there yet. And they do not have language access requirements.
Questions in the Q&A. First, do all board members file separately? And can management agents file for them with submitted ID?
Okay.
And then related to that, if board members input the info for themselves, who finalizes the report?
Okay, so does each board member file themselves? Can a third party file for the organization? How does it all fit together? So ultimately, the organization is responsible for filing the report. A member of the board can go in and complete the information for everybody, upload their IDs, input their birthdays, put the information about where the organization was formed, the legal name, the address. Third party can also do all of that information. Yeah, so if you have management or you have a committee that is advisory, not made up of board members, but they do some of these tasks, they can do that. If individual board members choose to not provide their ID and personal information to the organization and they go online and file it themselves, they get that FinCEN identifier number. They will go in, complete their information, and then give that FinCEN identifier number to whoever on the board is responsible for completing the report and putting in that entity information. Because remember, we have two big sections. We have the entity, the business itself, and then we have the beneficial owners. And since they are separate, there needs to be somebody to be in charge of the entity information. It can be the same person, it can be a different person.
Between reporting company information and company application.
Company applicant information is not applicable right now.
Okay.
So that will be grayed out. Yes, that will be for new businesses, new entities created in the future. It is the name of whoever incorporated them.
Okay.
So we don't need to worry about that. When you go online, X'd out. If you're listening live or later, or you go to do this and you realize, wait, I have a legal question now. I don't know if we're exempt. I don't know what type of entity we are. I need help determining from a legal perspective, who are the beneficial owners? Because sometimes it's straightforward and sometimes it's not. Or just other legal questions. The DC Bar Pro Bono Center every month has what's called a Small Business Brief Advice Legal Clinic. You're a small business as a housing organization. So every month, except for August, which just passed, there is this legal clinic where you can talk about business law related questions. There's a link in the presentation, probono.center/smallbizclinic, biz, B-I-Z. That will always redirect you to the next clinic coming up. They are typically in person and a walk-in clinic. A couple of times a year, they will be held virtually because the times of year, it can be tough to get people places. The next clinic will be on Wednesday, October 16th from 5 to 7:30 at the Anacostia Arts Center. If you have questions and you show up before 7:30, if you get there at 7:29, you will get to talk with a lawyer. Don't worry if it's not a legal enough of a question. If it is a legal question, even if it's a 10-minute discussion, that is okay. I am there, volunteer lawyers are there who are experts in all of these different things, and many of them in the Corporate Transparency Act, who want to help, right? This is a way to get legal information and advice to a part of the community that doesn't usually have the same type of access to legal advice and information as individuals. So we are happy and look forward to maybe seeing some of you at that small business clinic. Hopefully no questions pop up and it goes very smoothly for everybody. And when you go to file, and all the beneficial owners either go to file or provide their information, do it from a computer, it goes beautifully, it gets updated when it needs to be updated, and everything works great. Okay, do we have any other questions?
If people brought their information to this opportunity,
Yes.
would they be able to have file a review with the attorneys there?
So we do not have computers if somebody were to bring their information to the small business clinic. Most locations where we operate it, we don't have access to computers. But if they bring the different documents, the list of the board, we do have paper copies that they can go in and fill out and decide, okay, according to this is a beneficial owner. And they can then take that and go to a library or a neighbor and fill it in. For some small businesses, determining who is a beneficial owner is a real headache. And so it does require a conversation with a lawyer, looking at bylaws or other documents and sorting things out. And so if you have questions, yeah, bring those documents. If you don't know how to figure out which jurisdiction is the domestic formation place of your corporation or nonprofit or cooperative association, that's also a legal question. Bring any documents you have to try and get to the bottom of it. The more documents, information you have, the easier it makes it, but also not required, right? You can show up with nothing and say, I don't know, where do I go? Equally acceptable. All right. So that is it for, getting this information to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Trying to get that to go away.
So I just wanted to thank everybody for coming out tonight and attending virtually. We're going to close out the session and look forward to seeing you at the next training. For anybody who has questions or wants follow-up, we would be happy to connect you. We'll send the information out afterwards, and then we will connect you to DC Bar if you give Adam or Meche a call or an email to Douglas CLT. So thank you again, and have a nice night.